This is the Burning Presales podcast, and today we have a bit of a treat. Our question is going to be answered by our very own Rex Galbraith, who is our VP of Sales and who has sold to literally hundreds of pre-sales leaders at global enterprise businesses. All right, this is the Burning Presales podcast, official name pending. I don't know that we've actually decided that that's going to be the name of it, but I like it, and so I'm probably going to push it. And so far, I've talked almost exclusively with pre-sales leaders, but then Rex, who's our sales leader, pitched me on an idea. I don't know if I'm giving you more credit than you want, but this is the true story. You've probably sold as a sales leader to more pre-sales people than anyone else on the planet, because we effectively invented this category. And for the past 3-4 years, you've been selling into this category. There are now other players that are kind of tailoring their solution to pre-sales, but you're the OG, man, and you probably have a better view of better insight into what pre-sales leaders go through as somebody who's sold to them than anyone else. In fact, we didn't do an official count, but let's just say hundreds of accounts, many more than hundreds of individuals, leaders, practitioners. So yeah, I think it's true. It's safe to say that you've probably got a better sense of what's happening on the pre-sale side from an outsider's perspective than anyone else. And so it did make sense for us to maybe grab a conversation, record a conversation, and post it on the Burning Presales podcast. Because the notes that you sent to me, I thought were incredibly fascinating. And if we haven't already, by the time this goes live, published a guide from those notes, we will.
Yeah.
Because I'm in marketing, that's what I do. I try to steal other people's ideas and pass them off as my own, and try to take credit for it when we give you leads. That's
all the greats do that. So no shame in that.
So that's the genesis of this conversation. And so the way that you framed it, correct me if I'm wrong, was there are essentially 5 main pre-sale struggles that you've observed as a sales leader selling into the space that likely get in the way of them connecting their work to value. And so I've constantly got this idea in mind that what pre-sales teams and leaders do is they're tightly connected to revenue generation. They're probably more connected to it than most people realize. And they affect outcomes more than most people realize. And so whatever they're struggling with can have a huge impact on the entire funnel. And so if you can solve those struggles, you're effectively solving a lot of revenue black holes and leaks and pain points. So this is relevant to sales leaders. It's relevant to marketing leaders, and certainly relevant to pre-sales leaders. But that's the background. We can jump right into it. 5 pre-sale struggles from a sales leader's perspective. What's the first one on your list?
So number 1 is poorly tie performance to revenue. And so when I say these things, I say it out of love to the pre-sales community. Selling into them it really has been an honor. I think learning how big of a role they play has been big. And I've been a player coach. A lot of these deals I close myself, and a lot now I'm coaching people how to sell into pre-sales teams who now are starting to get budgets and things like that. And
yeah.
So before I jump into this one, I do want to say that these are themes that I see over and over again with pre-sales leaders. It just came to me as I was going through and I was talking to hundreds of different teams. They tend to have the same struggles. And so number 1 being tying performance to revenue. I have seen some pre-sales leaders that do a good job at it, but most don't. And I think it's because they're not wired like me and other pre-sales people. They're not as coin operated.
Mm-hmm.
I think they look at what they do as an art, and they really, truly care for the client, and that their success is not a revenue number. It is how well the client performs. And so I think that they just don't spend enough time measuring what they do with clients and tying that to the revenue. And so there are a lot of areas where I think it will help them build up their community if they do a lot better job at taking their demo metrics and their technical win metrics and tying it back to revenue.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen in a past life how a sales engineer might flag the accounts that they were a part of that eventually closed, and they'll maybe get some partial commission on that, or their comp is based on the deals that they help influence to close. But you're saying either do that, but do it more deliberately and with clear KPIs in mind, or is there something beyond that maybe teams should be considering?
Yeah, I think you need to listen to some of the pre-sales leadership that's out there that's doing it. There's people like Brian Oling at Concur. You got guys like Don Carmichael and Peter Cohen who have metrics and articles that they've put out there that help you tie that back. It needs to be imperative for the pre-sales team to do this because it ties into some of the other struggles that I've mentioned. If you don't tie to revenue, you don't have influence, and you have a hard time getting budget for the tools and things that you need.
Yeah. And one of those other struggles that you had mentioned, number 2 on the list, waste time with unqualified demos. So this is the first time when I joined Consensus, the first time I had ever heard the term unqualified demo. So obviously that's not something that's broadly posted or broadly talked about. Do you mind going into why that's a struggle, what it is exactly, and maybe the resolution for it?
So depending on who you ask, if you look at the 2021 workload and salary report that we did with over thousands of responses from pre-sales leaders, they say somewhere between 30 and 50% of demos are unqualified, which is unbelievable to me that they go in, to 100 demos and 30 or 50 of them you could throw right out, the window, and you would go back and not do them if you could. Peter Cohen had mentioned at 50%, and I think that number holds true. We had a company called Trintech we did a case study with that 50% of their demos were unqualified. And with a few adjustments, we're able to get it in 60 days to go under 5%. Mm-hmm. And so It is very fixable. I think the challenge is that because it's not being measured and that there isn't a lot of technology out there today that can help you pre-qualify a deal, that we're running into this issue. So what's funny is you have marketing teams that have MQLs, you have salespeople that have SQLs, and what do pre-sales have? They have nothing. It's what does the salesperson tell me? Their schedules are too managed by people like me who are selfish with their time. Yeah. And they have to use data to counteract and push back and to say, hey, unless it meets a certain threshold, you're not using our time because we have this much we have this much capacity in a day. Yeah. And this is the workload. And so I'm going to use data to determine where I put that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so it's not about doing fewer demos. It's about doing the right demos, if not more of the right demos. This is the debate between productivity and effectiveness. In the sales side, I always heard about you got to push productivity, but that just means doing more potentially of what's not working. You usually see that as a response in most teams. If we're not hitting our targets, do more of what we're doing. And all you're doing is amplifying everything that doesn't work and does work, but you're also creating a burnout culture. So it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of unqualified demos.
Yeah, we talk about automation all the time and demo automation, and people think that means they'll be doing less demos. And my hope is that you do more, but you do them where it counts. So unqualified means stop doing unqualified demos. You can automate parts of those. And then once it meets a threshold, then you get involved. If your value is based on the number of demos you do, you're going to have some challenges. The key is where you're doing them and when. And so there are a lot of ways to do that just by tracking what we call a demo qualified lead or a DQL. And there are companies like Salesforce and SAP and Oracle that are doing that. And sometimes they won't even do a demo until you reach DQL status, just like a salesperson won't give a discovery or start an opportunity until they get to SQL status.
I love that.
And needs to be the same.
Thank you for the plug for DQL. We actually have an article that defines DQL and how to measure it. So that's great marketing juice right there. All right, number 3.
So number 3 is they are silent achievers. and they are unsung heroes. Sales does a great job that when we win,
where's the violin, man?
Yeah,
Come on.
we let everyone know, and
Yeah.
pre-sales needs to do a little bit better job. I know they're humble, but they need to be more vocal. They remind me very much of like Steve Wozniak, who is the co-founder of the most valuable company ever created in Apple. But you don't hear his story being sung like Steve Jobs,
Right.
because he was more vocal. He was out there. I look at pre-sales like a Steve Wozniak, behind the scenes, the genius, and they get their satisfaction out of what they do for customers. But in a world where we're so vocal and there are so many voices, I'm really hoping that they're following the lead of some of these pre-sales leaders out there on LinkedIn and blogging, and you see the Pre-Sales Academy and some other things out there, and Pre-Sales Collective and other groups. They need to start being more vocal, because no one's going to be their voice for them if they don't do it for themselves.
I was just talking with Mark Green at Sage, and he was telling me how he feels like a marketer in a sales rep's body, which I thought was really funny. But the point is, you're kind of stuck between these worlds, and historically organizations have not put a lot of emphasis on the pre-sales team. And so I've heard from several people how they've been actively trying to pitch the vision of pre-sales so that it ranks higher on the list of priorities for sales leadership or for CROs. And so it kind of fits that, they're kind of in between these different worlds, and it's an odd space, even though they generally roll up to a sales leader. They're kind of forced into this, the sidecar, and it might have that psychological effect of making them feel like they're default silent achiever. So I kind of like that one. All right. Number 4, desire a seat at the table. And we're kind of talking about that, but go into it in more depth.
Yes. So it is a theme that I see a lot of times when people use our software. It is to get data to help them show their success. There are some sales leaders that are old school that see pre-sales as a sunk cost and just like a necessary evil. I see less and less of that now. And so it's hard for them to get a seat at the table, meaning they have a voice. And so the one thing that I will say is it's not out of a lack of them asking. Getting a seat at the table is not about asking, it's about earning it. And I think it goes back to tying performance to revenue. When you tie things to revenue, you have a voice. You will always have a voice when you can influence revenue. And so what I would say is you need to understand how the organization views you. If you are just this team that does demos and it's a necessary step, it's like, it's just what we pay for. It's the cost of sale.
Right.
You need to show that without you, that there are certain data points and things that will affect revenue negatively or positively, depending on how you're using it. So I would say stop asking for a seat at the table and start earning it through really good data and using tools to help you tie yourself to revenue.
I love that. Enough said. All right. Number 5 and final, the last thing that represents a struggle for pre-sales leaders and teams that you see as a sales leader. What is number 5?
So number 5 is I see too much of them valuing dependence over independence. And the dependence I'm talking about is a sales rep's dependence. Sometimes, a lot
as
of
in
times,
they're hooked at the hip to the sales rep, and they're maybe too dependent on that relationship.
That they enjoy sales reps being dependent on them.
I see.
That their value comes in that. And it reminds me of the Good to Great book, the difference between level 4 and level 5 leaders. A level 4 leader is somebody who is extremely valuable and the company runs better with them. But if they left the organization, the company would suffer right after.
Right.
And you would think that's a great leader because they're so good. The best leaders, which are level 5 leaders, are, if I was hit by a bus today, my team would move forward. And I think of that like a parent relationship. You would never want your kids to be dependent on you when they leave the house, that they can't live. You want them to live better lives than you. And when you're out of the picture, they're just fine. That's how the pre-sales relationship should be, is that we want to they should want to empower sales reps to do more and more on their own, and know that it doesn't make your role any less valuable. It actually enhances it. And so we talk a lot about demo automation, and a lot of people think, well, if demos are being automated, then sales reps don't need us as much. And I say, no, they'll need you more because of the insight that you get, and it helps you refocus your time where it matters. So I would say if you start seeing a culture within your organization where your pre-sales team gets value because the sales reps can't do much without them, you should think differently. You should start coming up with ways that maybe to help you qualify or help the reps do maybe entry-level type demos that are, maybe feature function if needed, but find ways to make them more independent, and your value will increase.
Now, you said something when we were talking about this podcast last week about Gordon Ramsay and Big Macs. I don't know that I made the connection, but it was in the context of this fifth point. So
yeah,
you might, since we're ending, maybe we end on the note of Gordon Ramsay and Big Macs. What was the point there?
But first, I'm a huge Gordon Ramsay fan. I don't even cook and I don't even cook that much. I just like to see him cook. And the one thing that I noticed is that we see pre-sales reps doing too many menial tasks that anyone can do. And I said, it reminds me of if Gordon Ramsay was working at McDonald's or serving chicken nuggets. He is so professional and so world class. It kills me.
It would be a misuse. Yeah.
So I would never want him to have unqualified meals or unqualified dinner planning because it's not suitable for his skill level. So pre-sales reps should be on conversations that really matter. And if you find yourself on too many feature function demos and you're being asked too early to be on a call, to demand better. But to do that, you need to come up with a plan. So have ways to qualify, use data so that you're not going to be the Gordon Ramsay and, serving chicken nuggets. You're going to be serving 7-course meals, which are, 7-course demos, we should say.
I love that. Thank you. So that's 5 struggles that a sales leader sees in pre-sales teams that they probably should spend some time on addressing. And let me just to end, quickly plug that Gordon Ramsay does have a burger recipe on YouTube. It's probably better than a Big Mac, but you should check it out. Anyways, thank you.
Thanks.